So let's start, as always, with the motivation, generating as much as we can a sense of closeness towards other sentient beings, all sentient beings, based on an understanding that, well, without others, we couldn't survive, we couldn't enjoy what we enjoy on a daily basis, and even on a spiritual level, well, without obnoxious beings, we couldn't practice patience. And without all sentient beings, well, what would our compassion be directed at, and so forth. And so in that sense, or in that way, to remember sentient beings are just a part of us. So sentient beings are a part of us, and therefore let's generate what's called affectionate love, which cherishes sentient beings and has a regard, has respect and esteem for them. Especially remembering that none of their mental afflictions are in the nature of their mind. Pay attention to their mental afflictions. The fact that they're controlled by endless misconceptions. By anger, hatred, attachment. And so many others. Leading to oftentimes unbearable suffering. So let's generate great compassion that focuses on all sentient beings. Wishes to protect them from all mental afflictions and the different types of sufferings these give rise to. For that great compassion to grow stronger and more determined. Resolving to do whatever we can to help sentient beings overcome their mental afflictions and all the suffering it gives rise to. Since right now we're helpless to even benefit ourselves, let's generate the mind of enlightenment, the aspiration or even determination to attain the enlightened state of a Buddha for the benefit of every sentient being. this mind, let's recite the prayer. Without letting go of this mind, let's recite the prayers. Enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha. By the merits of listening to the teachings of Buddhahood, for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood, for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood, for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. Okay, great. Well, the first thing I want to address today is your question from last time. That was such an important question, and I thought about it when I got home, and yesterday and today, for several reasons. I don't think I was able to address it in a focused kind of place. So, to it, well, first of all, I was thinking in the Buddhist scriptures, they often emphasize anger, right? I mean, a huge topic, but more in the context of personal harm. Being personally harmed by someone, insulted, and so forth. Rather than the anger over, I don't know, some kind of injustice, political harm, and so forth. Just were informed. And possibly to criticize a king or a government, you could be executed. Yeah, so that was a time when changing political structures, when the Buddha taught a time when political structures, to change political structures was not a realistic goal, right? Which doesn't mean it's not important nowadays, but I'm just saying to put it into context. But it does mention, in some teachings, it does mention patience in the face of someone harming others. For instance, in Shantideva's Bodhicayatara, verse number 10, though that doesn't talk about others, if there is a remedy to a problem, why get upset? Why get angry? If there isn't a remedy, if I can't do anything, what's the point in getting angry? But that's not as obvious in terms of the harm by other sentient beings. But for instance, verse 39 also of the 6th chapter, where is it? Verse 39. Sorry, I don't find the verse. Where is it? Oh no. I'm trying to find the chapter on patience. Is this working?
Kind of.
Great. Kind of.
The sound is clear. It's just image might buffer a bit.
Right. Okay. Well, what to do? Okay. If those who are like wanton children, who are like undisciplined, unruly children, are by nature prone to injure others, they're like children, like sentient beings. They're just right now, that's part of their nature, so they're by nature prone to injure others. There's no reason for our rage. It doesn't make sense to get upset and angry with them. It's like resenting fire for being hot, Shantideva says. So basically, there's other ways. I mean, just getting angry, it's like, that's just the nature of an unruly mind, basically. Okay. And then there's another verse, verse 62. Okay, 62. And if, when people, no. Oh, and if, when people slander us, we claim our anger is because they injure others, How is it we do not resent their slander when it's aimed at someone else? So this is not directly what we were saying, but it's about if there's someone we really don't like let's say a politician, someone who causes a lot of harm. When someone harms another person who's kind of I consider to be on my side, then of course I get upset. But if someone harms that politician in the same way, then it's like, rejoice. And I mean, trust me, I've had my own share of thoughts. Terrible thoughts. I mean, even after all these years, I remember thinking, why did the guy miss? Right? Some of you know what I'm talking about. Right? I mean, like, it's terrible. Like, you know, yeah, anyway, never mind. So I remember when Osama bin Laden was killed, thinking, first I heard it and I was like, yes! Oh no, what am I doing? Right? I mean, rejoicing in the death of another person. But I had that reaction. So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not affected by that, but it's really important because I'm not harming Osama bin Laden or anyone else with my mind. I'm mainly harming myself, big time. It's like that saying goes, anger is like poison, eating poison and expecting the other to die. It really feels that way, but unfortunately it just harms us. And particularly at the outset of cultivating great compassion, anger in response to injustice tends to become more of an issue. Right? If ordinarily as children we're just interested in our own kind of, you know, on a daily basis, so we don't concern ourselves with injustices. But then we learn about compassion, and our anger may be directed at certain politicians, for instance, or anyone else. So the magnitude of harm, of course, is much greater in this case. So of course, if it's directed at us, it's just one person, it's finite, it's easier to deal with. And we could confront the person, set boundaries, or kind of move on. When a politician, of course, harms many people, especially the vulnerable, then it feels immense and unjust on a larger scale. It's much harder to bear. And we feel responsible for them as well. There's a sense of responsibility. There's also the power imbalance. So politicians, they operate from a place of incredible power, given to them oftentimes by the people. So when they abuse that kind of power, it feels like they're not just hurting others, they're betraying their responsibility to protect. So it stirs a sense of injustice on principle, which goes much deeper than personal anger. So it makes it much harder. And it leads to a festering kind of anger, which can also be directed at ourselves. Because there's often no clear path to do anything. I mean, we can do something about the person that harms me, we may even know them, but we're so helpless. And it often repeats, creating a sense of chronic helplessness and moral exhaustion, right? Yeah. So this creates a much heavier emotional load, which is often mixed with grief, helplessness, and frustration. So it can lead to some unresolved kind of large-scale anger, and it tends to fester and feel worse over time. It leads to a chronic anger, right? Chronic type of anger, all right. And it can even lead to resentment and anger directed at ourselves because of our helplessness and inability to effect change, right? That's huge. That's a huge problem. But think, how frustrated would a Buddha feel? Should a Buddha feel? They've reached the highest spiritual state. They're ready to do anything to benefit sentient beings. They can do it, but are unable to stop people from harming themselves, right? I mean, if we feel we have a reason to feel frustrated, a Buddha should really be frustrated. They know exactly. I'm thinking, or used to think when I first learned about the Dharma, now I think about this less, but it was like said, like the Buddhas are all around us. They kept thinking, ooh, that's embarrassing. They know exactly what we're thinking. Oh no, that's really embarrassing. And then I thought, oh my God, every time I do something, they go, don't do it, don't, too late. No, don't do this, too late. It was just something that played in my mind, you know, like knowing. I don't know how someone harms themselves, you know, I can only guess. But someone like an enlightened being who can be anywhere at any time would know exactly, but they're totally helpless. Unless we listen to them, we follow the example. But I was thinking, we also talked about political activism. So today I was thinking, who are examples of political activists that are inspirational? I was thinking of Navalny, the Russian dissident who recently passed away, died in a Russian prison camp, or the well-known Chinese dissident Liu Xiaobao. I'm probably not saying it right, Liu Xiaobao. Am I saying it right? Anyway, who spent years in prison and died in 2017. They do not strike me as angry or resentful at all. Instead, every time I saw like video footages, like when they were on trial or whatever, they were very calm, courageous, and even compassionate. They weren't angry with whoever they held responsible for. No, there was that calm and kindness. It was very inspiring just seeing them. They weren't like, oh, they were activists, but not full of that kind of hatred or resentment. So it's important, I think, to understand that anger directed at others may start from compassion, but it can easily turn into a mental affliction if it's not transformed. So the key is not to suppress it, but to channel it skillfully into courage, wisdom, and sustained compassion, if we can, without letting anger burn us inside. Because that's what it does. It's stress. Anger is stress on body and mind. And an activist who's full of anger will be burned out after a few days. So anyway, this is therefore important to recognize. It's a beautiful type of anger, actually. But maybe we can redirect it towards the action and not the person, if we can do that. And I got a message, interestingly, today by a person who already a few days ago told me she had an issue with this whole thing, impermanence and emptiness and so forth. So she sent me a message earlier, she deleted it again, she felt it was too long, and today she sent me again a message and said exactly what you said. Impermanence and emptiness don't really help me when it comes to anger. And she said she lives in LA right now and is aware what's going on there, or has been until recently, maybe still now going on. And she said, this anger, impermanence, emptiness, didn't help. But the one thing that helped her was, especially with the supporters, it was like for her, a main point wasn't just the politicians, but it was also the supporters of these politicians. And she realized the fear. She thought like fear, many of them are governed by fear. And she felt that was something she could connect to on that level, that there's this fear. She knows what fear feels like. So it doesn't matter what we're afraid of, but a lot of our negative actions are governed by fear. Right? So, I don't know, it's totally irrational fear oftentimes, but to them it's not clear in that moment. But it helped to soften her mind. Just to think, yeah, she didn't condone their actions, but it explained it and she could deal with it. I thought it was really beautiful, and it came at the right time. But then, that wasn't your original question, of course. That wasn't I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the thoughts I had in relation to that. But now your question is, where your point was, reflecting on impermanence is impermanence or emptiness is not really that beneficial. It's very true. At this point in time, for us, this is not an effective antidote. But subtle impermanence and emptiness are very powerful. So not to neglect them totally. However, the problem is that anger is very fast and reactive. Focusing on subtle impermanence is more subtle and quiet. So, therefore, compassion can become strong, it can be powerful, even in our situation right now. But right now, subtle impermanence and emptiness don't move us in such a powerful way. We're just at the beginning. So right now, for us, it's a gentle and contemplative insight, but it takes time and stability to come to that level of power, if you like. So when we're in the grip of anger, our mind isn't receptive to these kind of refined contemplations. It reminds me of trying to listen to a whisper in a storm, right? Listening to this quiet voice in a storm. Our mind is in this uproar of our anger. And anger, of course, feels on this sense, or in this case, feeds on that sense of injustice, and reflection on impermanence may feel, and emptiness may feel in that moment like minimizing or softening that perceived harm. Right? Oh, they're all impermanent. Oh, they lack inherent existence. Right? Like almost like, oh, it's not really there. I remember years ago, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had a meeting, it was in the 90s, I think, with many of the Buddhist teachers, many of the Western Buddhist teachers. And one huge topic was women's place in Buddhism. So there has been a lot of change, but at that time, I mean, it's still not totally equal, but it was a lot worse then. And so one teacher, she said, sometimes other teachers tell us, oh, just think of emptiness, but that doesn't help. And someone said, well, that's not a good reason. You can't deal with it in that way. You can't solve the problem by telling everyone to think of emptiness. That's not a solution. So it was very clear about it, that it's not like throw emptiness in the room and everyone feels better. No, it's a long-term topic that we should not neglect, even though directly it doesn't help us, in the spur of the moment it doesn't help us, but we shouldn't neglect it. So therefore it may be when we're feeling this sense of injustice that we're not minimizing anything. It's all about understanding reality. Something else that's important is that subtle impermanence requires mental space. So to meaningfully reflect on that momentary change, or on emptiness even, then it's important that our mind is very calm and has that spaciousness, while anger is narrow and fixated, right? So there's no room in that moment. It makes it very hard. And we need the right kind of sequence. So before subtle impermanence can help, we may need to kind of pause the emotional momentum of our anger, right, through breathing meditation, or just focusing on the anger itself, right? If you don't focus on the object that kind of generates your anger and enhances your anger, well, if you focus on the anger itself, usually it dissipates. Usually it goes away, because the anger is not angry with itself, so how can it continue? Become aware of the emotion, of course, as well. Recognize the cost of remaining angry, of how it doesn't benefit. And then once you have that space in mind, then you reflect on impermanence. So in subtle impermanence is transformative, but it's slow. It's like when you take Western medicine, a painkiller, versus alternative medicine. Both have their place. I'm not saying don't take a painkiller. In certain moments, you need a painkiller. So compassion, for instance, that can be quite strong, get a strong sense of empathy, maybe just become aware of the fear of other people, just their not knowing, right? They're just not knowing what's happening. Even their drive in needing to, their sense of identity being so connected to, I don't know, having a certain position and so forth. I mean, that terrible attachment that we are slaves of, however, not of that particular type of attachment. So in that way, it becomes easier to deal with the anger. But in the long term, it's important to keep practicing because it really affects the mind. So it may not be, like I said, right away an antidote, but in the long term, we see that our so-called enemies, our emotions, our problems, they're not fixed. They do keep changing. We don't hold on to a solid wrongness. We see it's in relation to certain things. We label it, right? And of course there is a conventional wrong, but it doesn't seem as inherently terrible, overwhelming as it seemed earlier. And we develop, of course, a greater space of mind. Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to mention that. I thought it was an incredibly important question because it's something we all face. All this makes so much sense in theory, but in our daily life, that is the hardest part. Taking that first step and making it relevant. It's one of the most difficult things to do. Not just for us Westerners, for anyone. I mean, for Tibetans, our teachers talk about it. It takes time, it takes a lot of time. But we shouldn't let go of it and always question, how is just a little bit of what I heard today relevant to me? If it just makes a little bit of change. And of course we keep hearing it again and again. And it's all about finding these, whatever we hear, finding how their methods to help us cope with our problems. Okay. Now you had a homework. The homework was, we've heard that in order to enter, for instance, the universal path, the path of a bodhisattva, or the path of someone who is now a bodhisattva, in order to then eventually attain the state of a Buddha, you don't have to be a person of the highest philosophical view of the Prasangika school. You cannot progress. Once you're on the Mahayana, I don't want to use that word, once you're on the path of the universal vehicle, you, at some point, in order to progress, need to realize emptiness, but if you hold the view of inherent existence, you won't be able to cross that threshold of realizing emptiness. However, it's not necessary to realize the ultimate nature of phenomena in order to become a bodhisattva. Therefore, you can be a bodhisattva as a follower of the Vaibhashika school, a follower of the Satantrika school, a follower of the Chittamatra school, and Svatantrika. That's okay. But can you be a non-Buddhist, a Christian, a non-Buddhist? That was Venerable Lobsang's question. And I ask you, what do you think? And if not, why not? You should, yeah. Do you want to go ahead? You were the first to react.
We can say that a Buddhist would take refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And first we establish that Buddhahood is possible. And for non-Buddhists, there is no concept of becoming enlightened. Secondly, there is like, you do not know what the suffering is, you do not know what the cause of suffering is, cessation and path. So you don't know where you're going, what you're doing. You can have like lots of compassion, but...
Okay, so I have to repeat this, I hope I can do that, for those online. So you're saying that, well, first of all, a Buddhist is someone who takes refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Someone who establishes that Buddhahood is possible, does not, like someone who's a Buddhist understands about suffering, the nature of suffering, how to overcome suffering, and then eventually, that there's a path and there's a cessation and so forth. So that means, therefore, unless you have that kind of background, it'll be difficult to enter the path. Yes. And Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, it's similar. It depends on how one defines the term bodhisattva. If one connects it to Buddhism, then a Christian couldn't be a bodhisattva because above all, the third seal, I think, the four seals of Buddhism, which defines who is a Buddhist or the Buddhist path, then the third seal would not apply because a Christian doesn't believe or have the notion of selflessness of phenomena.
All right, okay, all right. Well, first of all, what is the definition of a Buddhist? What is the definition of a Buddhist?
Someone who adheres to the four seals.
Pardon?
Someone who adheres to the four seals.
That is the definition of a person, a Buddhist philosopher. A person who adheres, well, it's not, I'm calling it a Buddhist philosopher, really the term is a person who follows Buddhist tenet systems. A tenet holder, exactly, yeah, that's the word. A person who is a Buddhist tenet holder, yeah, versus a Buddhist. I mean, a lot of Tibetans, I don't even know what you're talking about. You say tenets, right? That's a Buddhist philosopher. So what is the definition of a Buddhist? Or a Buddhist by path versus a Buddhist by philosophical view or by tenet? What is the difference? You basically said it.
Well,
To take refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, what is the main object of refuge? Buddha, Dharma or Sangha? Dharma. Okay, so you take refuge mainly in the teachings. Or more precise or more strictly, I mean in a stricter sense, what does the Dharma refer to here? Taking refuge in the Dharma. What is the Dharma in the strictest sense of the term?
Cessation.
The cessations of suffering and the path. The Arya path that leads you there, right?
So wouldn't be more the path and the cessation?
Would be both. The Arya path, are those paths of beings who realize emptiness directly and are now able to slowly eradicate what is in the way to becoming liberated or fully enlightened. So what does taking refuge mean? It's such a weird word, right? Do we take refuge on a daily basis? I'm not saying Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, like on an ordinary, like in an ordinary. You know, you feel crappy, you feel really crappy, right? And you take refuge in a bar of chocolate. Sound familiar? Right? Kind of like, okay, I'm not feeling well and I have a problem, I want to solve this problem. Well, you know, binge on chocolate or on, I don't know, on movies or whatever, or hanging out with friends. This is also like, it's kind of like finding a solution, like a Tibetan takes refuge in India, they have a problem, right? So in order to avoid that problem, it's not about running away, that's not the point, but saving your life, saving your religion and your culture, so you find another way to deal with that. In that way, I take refuge. I'm taking refuge in the Dharma. I'm having a problem. You can still binge on chocolate. I mean, it depends on your physical condition, I guess, right? But in general, no one is saying don't do whatever else you usually do, but maybe, or look at the Dharma, where's the solution? And for that, you need to have some understanding of the Dharma. So Dharma in the sense of teachings, but also Dharma in the strictest sense, there's a cessation, there's a path, and working towards that. And in order to, as Katya said, am I saying it right, Kate or Katya? Okay. As she said correctly, I mean, we take refuge, we need to know, we need to understand all this. I mean, I'm not just taking, I mean, of course there are Buddhists who take refuge and had no idea who the Buddha is. Definitely. I mean, I lived for a few years with a girl, she was the sister of my classmate, and we lived together. And so in the beginning when she first came, I once asked her, do you know who the Buddha is? She's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, who is he? Oh, he's some Tibetan. Right? She hadn't learned it. I mean, she'd come from Tibet and religious education was not part. I mean, she went to a Chinese school, so she just didn't know who the Buddha was. She had incredible faith, but she took refuge, I mean, the prayer, and she went to circumambulation, but she didn't know Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So therefore, to be a Buddhist is actually, yes, to have some knowledge of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, seeing the solution of our problems basically in the Dharma. The question is, of course, can you still follow the Christian way? From a Buddhist point of view, I don't see that much of a problem. I mean, like taking refuge, the thing is like, there is a bit of like, there are these precepts when you take refuge. So for instance, in order to become in order to become liberated or even enlightened, you should not follow the teachings other than the teachings that take you there. The Buddhist teachings. That makes sense, because if you follow only the Christian instructions, it doesn't take you to enlightenment. If you ask a priest, please give me a teaching on how to become enlightened, they're like, what are you talking about? I can teach you how to get to heaven, but to avoid hell, but I don't think, yeah, the enlightenment as it's, or liberation as it's prescribed in Buddhism, I don't think that Christianity talks about that as like their mainstream teachings. I don't know, some individuals, I can't tell. So therefore, in order to become liberated, in order to strive towards overcoming samsara, well, the Buddhist teachings are going to help you, not other teachings. If you follow other teachings, you will not get there. You will not get to liberation. So that's the whole point. But it's not about at the exclusion of everything else. I think in Christianity, I don't think you're allowed to be, I'm not sure. Can you be a Buddhist and a Christian from a Christian point of view? I'm not sure. I don't think my priest at home, our Roman Catholic priest, would have been happy. And I come from a very Roman Catholic area, and they really don't like that. A lot of people don't like that I'm a Buddhist. A Buddhist nun is like even worse, but just being a Buddhist. And some are open. I mean, it just depends. So the point is, from a Buddhist point of view, yeah, well, you take refuge. You can still take bits and pieces from other religions, practice them, take bits and pieces from Buddhism. I mean, there's not even a need to become, in fact, His Holiness discourages everyone from becoming a Buddhist in the first place, right? One of the first teachings I received by His Holiness was like, don't change your religion. I didn't listen to that one, but it makes sense, because it comes with a whole package of culture and you know, history and so forth, and to undo what is culture and what is Buddhism is very difficult. It's not easy to understand that. And our religion is so much part of our identity, so we don't need to let it go right away. Just take the bits and pieces that we find beneficial, because Buddhism was only taught to benefit others and not for the Buddhist club to grow. Right? It's not about that. No, I'm not saying that the other religions are like having a club. No, it's, they believe definitely that you can only go to heaven, possibly. I'm not sure about everyone's belief, but in general, I think unless you're a Christian, you go to hell. And so it may still be motivated by compassion that they try to convert people, but this is not something that Buddhism believes in. You can't convert other people. They have to believe it from their own side, take that step, and otherwise it doesn't work. But the point is, going back to the original question, so if you believe that enlightenment and liberation is possible, yeah, then you work towards it. You make an effort to really understanding that liberation and enlightenment are possible, and then enter the path. Why would you understand how suffering, what causes suffering, the misconception of reality? No other spiritual system, as far as I'm aware, talks about inherent existence doesn't exist, right? Therefore, it just wouldn't make sense that someone enters the path. Or, well, you don't need to believe in the lack of inherent existence, of course, as we've heard, because Vaibhashikas and so forth can enter the path. But at least liberation as described in Buddhism, I don't think any other religion prescribes it in that way. Even the Hindu traditions, they talk about moksha, but explain it like nirvana, moksha, but it's not the same as in Buddhism. In fact, they believe the self, in a particular type of self, that is negated by Buddhists, and that is considered to be important in order to attain liberation. Okay, so therefore, in response to that, and what about Buddhist philosopher? You could also likewise argue, and as Venerable Yandren said it as well, to be a Buddhist philosopher, and there are four seals. Very good. They are the four seals of Buddhism, that every Buddhist philosopher or Buddhist tenet holder asserts? What are those 4 seals?
All composite things are impermanent.
All compounded or conditioned phenomena are impermanent.
All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering.
All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. So anything that was generated by karma and afflictions is contaminated.
All phenomena in the nature of emptiness and selflessness.
All phenomena are empty and selfless, or in the nature of emptiness, or emptiness and selflessness, or all phenomena are empty and selfless is better, because in the lower schools they don't believe in emptiness. And what Madam Young said, Nirvana is peace. It could be a restaurant in McLeod College. There was a restaurant called Kana Nirvana. Nirvana food. It's no longer there. It was like a vegetarian vegan restaurant, I think. Anyway, so Nirvana is peace. Okay, great. So that's been answered. That question, very good. Yes, please.
When tell certain stories, like if we're going to use Buddhism and the path and Dharma as a canoe to cross the river, do we carry the canoe once we get to the other side, right?
Once you get to the other side, you leave the canoe
Yes.
behind.
So
Yeah.
you leave Buddhism behind.
Yes, you do.
So it's like going up a mountain. Buddhism is one path, or there's 10 paths of Buddhism going up the mountain. There, in my belief, even before I knew how to spell Buddhism,
Yeah, I understand. They're just different paths up the same mountain.
you know, there are some pretty enlightened beings that don't know that there is a path to do this. There are people that we can learn from all the time. I mean, and the 4 seals, you can follow those without being a Buddhist.
Okay, but following them and asserting them to be true. Okay, so his question, his comment was this, that, okay, so this is the definition of a Buddhist tenet holder and of a Buddhist, but he says that once you reach the other side, once you reach liberation or enlightenment, do you still, once you cross an ocean, which is like the ocean of samsara, and once you've crossed the ocean, will you take that boat with you or will you leave it behind? And the answer is yes, you leave it behind. For instance, when you study about refuge, you learn that once you've attained the goal of liberation or enlightenment, especially enlightenment, you no longer need to take refuge. A Buddha doesn't take refuge. The question is, of course, is a Buddha a Buddhist or not? There's a debate, but never mind. This is usually said to be the definition of a Buddhist who's not yet enlightened. So the Buddha is a different... But the point is, okay, therefore, yes, I absolutely agree with him. As I'm saying, you leave the boat behind. You leave the ferry, whatever, behind when you get to the other side. And then Jack added that he believes that any kind of spiritual goal is like the top of a mountain, and it's just one top, and different paths lead to the same top. And he says that there are people, he believes they practice the 4 seals, for instance, but they wouldn't call them that. Well, they would not first of all fulfill the definition, because it's about asserting the 4 seals. So practicing the 4 seals, living the 4 seals, doesn't make someone a tenet holder, just by way of the definition, because it's supposed to be like you believe in them, you propound this particular view. But that's just a matter of like, who cares, you call someone Buddhist or not, it's just a term that is applied in a certain case. I mean, in the end, it's really just a label we give to certain people. In fact, I had such a hard time to call myself a Buddhist when I was already a Buddhist nun. It was like, are you a Buddhist nun? Yes. Are you a Buddhist? I didn't want to, I was always like, I'm put into this, I don't know, into this compartment, and I couldn't be anything else. It felt like, it was a bit bizarre in the beginning. But that was, I mean, now I can say yes, so it's okay, because in the end it's just a label that is given based on certain assertions, if you like. Okay, or in certain behavior. Now, Venerable Yandushi said something depends on the definition of a bodhisattva. The definition of a bodhisattva is someone who has bodhicitta. And the definition of bodhicitta is someone who wants to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And it's not saying enlightenment could be the Christian enlightenment or the Jewish enlightenment or the Muslim enlightenment. No, it's enlightenment as set forth by the Buddha. It's not saying it's a better enlightenment or no. It's just saying it's it doesn't even mean in Tibetan, it doesn't even say enlightenment. This is just an English term. The Tibetan word has nothing to do with light and becoming enlightened. It's actually, the word is awakening from the sleep of ignorance, right? So niseba, it's actually remember the word Buddha has also the connotation in this text of awakening. Seba, niseba, Buddha, the Sanskrit word, not the Tibetan word, but the Sanskrit connotation is niseba. We covered that in Lama Tsongkhapa's text. And awaiting, I mean, in Tibetan, it has a different meaning in terms of like purifying that which can be purified and realizing that which can be realized, or attaining that which can be realized. But nevertheless, Bodhisattva means something very specific. So sometimes people say, even in Tibetan society, oh, this person is such a Bodhisattva. What they mean is such a kind and altruistic and amazing person. And they are, definitely, extremely altruistic and everything. But by definition, just the label Bodhisattva is just not used in the strictest sense of the word, which means someone who wants to become enlightened. So whether Jesus was a Bodhisattva or not, if Jesus strived to become enlightened, sure, by definition. But that doesn't mean Jesus wasn't this amazingly compassionate and kind person, and many others as well. And yes, you see, like, from a Buddhist point of view, they say these great beings, they may have been bodhisattvas, but as the Buddha taught, according to people's needs and predispositions, well, he taught sometimes a view, he even taught some beings that there's a self. There is an inherent self, there is a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. He said it, because for some that was beneficial. So, did that make him a non-Buddhist teacher? Well, for that person, probably yes. But the point is just, I don't know about the mountain and the path. I have no idea. It's possible that every religion's goal is enlightenment. It was set forth for that reason. I mean, what is enlightenment? The removal of all obscurations. That's it. I mean, call it enlightenment or call it something else. Do the other religions, is that the goal? Did Muhammad talk about Islam? Did Jesus talk about Christianity and so forth? With that in mind, I cannot say. I can't tell. But what's most important, so I'm not denying it, but what I'm saying is most important is to see the similarities, to know we can learn from each other. That's very important for religious harmony, definitely. And the rest is to be seen. I don't know. Right? Anyway, so Jack, hopefully I addressed that. This is just my personal, and I really don't know. In the end, I don't know. But returning to what we just said. So anyway, to enter the path, at least there must be an assertion that that is possible. And then that enlightenment, liberation is possible, and aim for that, basically. Okay. All right. But I have a debate here. Not about this now, but I prepared a few debates before we move on. Okay. Now, going back to the 3 types of compassion, we heard that there is great compassion that is conjoined with the mind that realizes the impermanence of sentient beings, directly conjoined. We heard there's great compassion that is directly conjoined with a mind that realizes the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I, and a mind that realizes the emptiness of sentient beings, right? So that there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent I, but that's all. There's no other type of great compassion mentioned, right? There isn't. Why not? How about great compassion that is directly conjoined with a mind that realizes the suffering of sentient beings, the samsaric suffering of sentient beings? Right? Why is that not mentioned? Why in this context it is not mentioned? This is usually like one of the debates here. The response, well, first of all, let me hear what your response is. So, you have impermanence of sentient beings, the lack of a self-sufficient substantial existent I of sentient beings, and the lack of inherent existence of sentient beings. All these are mentioned as being conjoined with great compassion, right? As in like enhancing great compassion, being beneficial when it comes to great compassion enhancing them. But what about generating the mind that realizes the suffering nature of sentient beings? Directly conjoined with great compassion. So great compassion runs parallel with a mind that is great compassion is directly conjoined with the mind realizing the suffering nature of sentient beings. In other words, it runs parallel with that great compassion and they enhance each other. Why not with suffering? Well, usually one answer that is given is, could be given is, here we're focusing on how we can come to understand the ultimate nature of phenomena. So the goal, that was one answer we used to give, so the goal would be to realize, to use great compassion as a type of mind that enhances our understanding of ultimate reality, which is emptiness. But then, if you give that answer, and it kind of makes sense, you understand sentient beings are impermanent, that's already extremely beneficial to understanding there's no solid, concrete I. And then you understand there is no controller I that controls mind and body. And then you understand there's no inherent I, there's nothing that can be found. So then, I would argue, if I were to debate with you, so understanding suffering does not help you to understand selflessness? And you're like, not really. Or to understand emptiness. But there is a quote that is often given in the second chapter of the Pravanavatika. Many teachers give this quote all the time. You may not always recognize it because it's maybe translated differently. In Tibetan, it's like it's like you hear all the time, right? It's always the same words, which translates basically into, well, to give you the first two lines, the view of emptiness liberates from cyclic existence, while the other meditations serve to prepare practitioners for this view. Okay? So the view of emptiness liberates from cyclic existence, and all other practices. This is also how how Shantideva starts his 9th chapter on wisdom. He says all the meditations are in order, so the wisdom chapter, so the 9th chapter, it's on wisdom, and Shantideva says in the very beginning, the great Bodhisattva Shantideva says in the very beginning, all the meditations are done with the goal to understand emptiness. So this is also what Dhammakirti says here. The view of emptiness liberates from cyclic existence, while the other meditations serve to prepare practitioners for this view. And then it says, therefore it is taught that insight into impermanence gives rise to insight into suffering, and from insight into suffering arises insight into selflessness. What? Right? So this is an important quote, given time and again. It's taught that insight into impermanence, I add the word insight, it doesn't say that in Tibetan, but that's implied. So I put it in brackets here, but anyway, it's taught that insight into impermanence gives rise to insight into suffering, and from insight into suffering arises insight into selflessness. Yeah, very important quote, given again and again. Solness gave it many times in the past, as well as other masters. Okay, so this particular quote is basically teaching, first you have to understand impermanence, then you have to understand suffering, and from insight into suffering. So Venerable Lobsang didn't hear what we just said. Who wants to repeat it? I want him to hear that. Who wants to repeat it? Anyone?
Insight to impermanence.
Insight into, okay. So, all right, where's the quote from? The Pramanavartika. So I gave this quote from the second chapter. Yes, the second chapter of the Pramanavartika was composed by whom? Dharmakirti. Very good. So in the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, what does Dharmakirti say?
Insight into
Emptiness.
emptiness.
Yeah. Insight into impermanence.
Impermanence leads to
Insight into suffering.
which leads
Into insight into emptiness. What a weird statement. But then I translated Gyaltsabje's explanation of this, clarifying the path to liberation. So Gyaltsabje composed a commentary on this text on logic by Dharmakirti. It's one of the most important texts in Tibetan Buddhism, this text by Dharmakirti, especially the second chapter. So he says, therefore the Buddha taught that realizing conditioned phenomena as impermanent leads to realizing contaminated phenomena as suffering, or as in the nature of suffering. And from realizing suffering comes the realization of selflessness. Doesn't help us. That's just the words just spelled out. Okay. Therefore, in a sutra, it states, monks, or monks and nuns, is the physical form permanent or impermanent? Is the body permanent or impermanent? And the monks, or the monks and nuns say, venerable, it is impermanent. What is that which is impermanent? Is it suffering or happiness? And they respond, venerable one, it is suffering. It's in the nature of suffering. So what is impermanent is suffering and subject to change. Regarding this, is it appropriate to think this is mine, this is I, this is myself? And they answer, no. It still doesn't help, but at least you got the quote from the sutra. Okay, so now he says, previously there was both grasping at happiness as something to be obtained for oneself and grasping at it as permanent. That's our entire life. That describes our entire life, even though in words that we wouldn't use nowadays. But we hold on to things as lasting happiness. Having a good reputation, being successful, being beautiful, externally in particular, having certain financial needs. What else? What does it mean to be successful in this world? We see that as true happiness. I mean, if you live, especially in countries where, well, materialistic countries like the West nowadays, if you ask people what is happiness, yeah, they say one thing, but they live as if it was something else, right? Success, reputation, the whole thing, as if it was happiness, lasting. I mean, as if it was possible to give us lasting happiness and permanent, right? Permanent. I mean, reputation. If you want to have a good reputation, it's like one day you have a good reputation and the next time everyone forgets about you. Right? I mean,
That's very much India. You know, that's India all over.
Well, that's the West all over. Like famous people. They're famous one day.
You're often pointing it out to the West. You know,
Oh, you're right. It's also India.
it's rigid.
Oh, yeah, of course, it's India as well, of
If you're a
course.
shoemaker, you're going to marry a shoemaker. You ain't going to marry a lawyer.
Right,
Or
okay.
your grandmother, your mother, your
Right.
and it goes on and on. There's no break in it.
Right, okay. So the thing is, yes, it's everywhere in the world, of course, but most of us come from the West. So basically, and I'm saying, like, when you go to the West and, you know, you ask people there, especially in very materialistic society where it plays much more of a role, but you're right, of course, materialism is everywhere. Anyway, so the point is, we grasp at happiness as something to be obtained for oneself and grasping at it as permanent. So we hold on to it as being permanent, but of course we have to constantly renew that. From these two coming together, there's grasping at that happiness as a reliable, unchanging basis for satisfaction. When that happiness is realized, when that happiness is understood to be impermanent, this very realization leads to the arising of the understanding of it being in the nature of suffering. Right? It's impermanent. It's constantly just that. It doesn't give us that happiness, that lasting happiness, true happiness, because it's fleeting. So in that sense, it makes sense, right? When we understand phenomena as being under the control of karma and mental afflictions, we will also understand there's no autonomous person. They're just these mental experiences. They're just these experiences our mind has all the time, experiences that our body has, but there's no autonomous person. It's just like constantly experiencing constantly different experiences. The sequence of the three, course impermanence, suffering and selflessness, or impermanence, suffering and selflessness, is thus understood. This passage explains the logical progression of the three marks of existence in Buddhist meditation practice, showing how understanding impermanence naturally leads to understanding suffering, which in turn leads to understanding selflessness. It emphasizes that this isn't just a theoretical sequence, but a practical path where each realization prepares the mind for the next deeper insight. Isn't that beautiful? I think it's really beautiful. It's so old, this text, and still so beautiful, right? I mean, old as in like, what, 6th, 7th century, 5th, 6th, 6th century. So a long time ago that was composed. But nevertheless, even though that debate, yes, but you would still say, okay, so this is the sequence, but understanding suffering is not seen as one of the most important realizations to come to emptiness. So you could still wiggle your way around it. Well, I just wanted to give you a taste of how you debate. You take something that you've just learned, and then you compare it to everything else. You can't do that right away, but if you get a bit of a sense, you develop that ability. You always question, and a lot of people do that without debating. It's really interesting how a lot of Westerns, without actually formally debating, being taught these kind of debates, for instance, it gives them a taste of, okay, you always question everything. Take something else, it says something else in a different text. Isn't that contradictory? You always look for contradictions, you always look for inconsistencies. You're always skeptical. You don't take anything on faith, right? Very important principle. It was not considered disrespectful in class, for instance, without teacher. They would, if we said, well, you just said such and such, but that's contradictory to such and such. And they'd be like, great, thank you, wonderful, really encouraging this kind of pointing out of inconsistencies and contradictions, because it shows you're really looking into this. Does it make sense or not? Take your own experience. That is also really important. Bring in your own experience. You just did it. It's not just in the West, it's also in India. Exactly. Right? This whole debate about activism. Very good. In the back of your mind. Does this accord with whatever else you've studied? Comparing it to others' texts, and comparing it, even more importantly, to your own experience. Does this make... And don't hesitate to mention it. Jack just did it, right? His own experience, his own view, comparing it. I responded to that, but in the end I left it open. This is my opinion. I could be totally wrong about it. So it's very important to do that all the time. And most importantly was this, we talk about emptiness and impermanence. What about my anger with the political situation? It doesn't work. Right? Very good. Very important. And finding other means that work for us right now, because we start where we are. We start where we are. Right? What is beneficial to me? And I feel the same way as you are feeling. And I'm not like meditating on emptiness and all my problems are solved. My understanding of emptiness is too basic or is not there in any way that I could make it effective. Right? Just a little bit of what my teachers told me, but no deep realization. But that doesn't mean I give up on it, because I'm hoping it'll deepen. And that's the beauty of it. When you continue doing it, you can look back and go, oh, I understood that better. Oh, I heard the same teaching maybe 1,000 times, but now I look at it differently. So it's every time you can go deeper. But never stop doing exactly what I said, that skeptical mind. Always go back to your own experience. It's like a self-debate if you want. All right. then another debate. The three factors, the three causes of bodhicitta. Remember? In the very beginning, the first verse of entering the middle way. The last 2 lines of the first verse. What did the text teach us? There are 3 things a bodhisattva needs. 3 causes for a bodhisattva. 3 causes of bodhicitta. What were these?
Compassion.
Great compassion. Huh? What? The great compassion. Then?
Buddha.
No. 3 types of mind.
Oh.
3 types of mind. 3 types of mind. Okay, great compassion. Then?
Emptiness.
Realization of emptiness. Third one?
Renunciation.
No. I'll read it out for you. The compassionate mind and non-dual cognition, as well as the awakening mind, these are the causes of a bodhisattva. Awakening mind? Bodhicitta? Bodhicitta is a cause of a bodhisattva? No, but it wasn't bodhicitta itself. It was something else. It was contrived bodhicitta. Contrived bodhicitta. So the mind that... This is an important aspect. So when we generate bodhicitta, right? We do this before class. So let's say, I don't know what your bodhicitta is like, but let's say it has the 2 elements. Great compassion preceded that. You had great compassion. You really generated the sincere wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and to contribute to that. And then you generated the mind, I really want to become enlightened. You have a sense, yes, enlightenment is the only solution. You generated. That would have been contrived bodhicitta. It's contrived in that it required a certain amount of effort. It didn't arise spontaneously. But you can only come to uncontrived bodhicitta, which is actual bodhicitta, if you go through that phase. If you go through that kind of bodhicitta. It's like anything, right? Before you can do... what do you call that? Jump in the air and you go like that.
Somersaults.
Yeah, somersault. A somersault. Before you can do a somersault, you do like a... You instead of you maybe jump on some kind of device that helps you to jump up high enough, and you do it with that device. You can't do it just on the floor like that, jumping high enough to do the somersault. You may use that little, I don't even know what that is, springboard. You see, my English is only enough for the dome. It's not enough for gymnastics. I don't have the terminology. So a somersault, when you do a somersault, you use like a springboard or something. That is like, what is it? Like contrived bodhicitta. It's still amazing you can do it. I mean, no way, give me the best springboard, I could not do it. But someone who's trained enough, they can do it. Until eventually they're able, without the springboard, without the trampoline, they can just do it on their own. Does that make sense? So here, Chandrakirti is emphasizing you need 3 types of mind. You need great compassion. You need the understanding of emptiness. If you are a follower of sharper faculty, if you're someone who's always questioning and don't take things on faith, right? And you need that contrived bodhicitta. That mind that is the cause for this spontaneous bodhicitta. Once you have that spontaneous mind, you no longer need the springboard. You don't no longer need that kind of extra effort, then you become a bodhisattva. But it stresses the fact that it needs to be preceded by that contrived version. It also stresses the fact that if you follow, and the text wants to encourage us to always question, to not take on faith. If possible, to realize emptiness before we generate bodhicitta, because then our bodhicitta will be more powerful. And of course, great compassion we need anyway. All right, so these 3 factors. What is their sequence? Here it talks about great compassion first, then realizing emptiness, then that contrived bodhicitta. All right, I asked you before, why Why do you realize emptiness before you generate bodhicitta? Some people put down their head. Why? Yes, go ahead.
Because realization of emptiness generates the conviction that enlightenment is possible.
Because the realization of emptiness, now you're in trouble because you have to tell me why. So because the realization of emptiness helps us to understand that enlightenment is possible. Why? In what way?
Because they say that cognitive obscurations are the thing that's omniscience, which prevents Buddhahood, and this is the appearance of intrinsic existence, and unless you have realization of emptiness, you don't see how this appearance of intrinsic existence prevents omniscience.
That's not enough. So he says, we understand that enlightenment is only, what prevents us from becoming enlightened is that we have certain obstructions in our mind called cognitive obstructions. And these cognitive obstructions, they manifest by way of the appearance of inherent existence. And so without realizing emptiness, we can't really, but there's more to it.
If you are in non-dual realization of emptiness, you see that this is reality.
Okay, I give you one hint. The root misconception. The root misconception. What is that root misconception? What is it? Root ignorance. What is? We hold on to inherent existence. Okay. What is the connection between holding on to inherent existence and not being enlightened? What is the connection? What is the connection between the two? Being unenlightened and the root misconception. Why are we unenlightened? Why is our mind? Yes, yes.
It's the same. It is.
Because of that mind.
Yeah,
Because that is that mind. The only reason we're in trouble. So we're not bad people. In fact, we have everything to be a Buddha right now. Right here, right now. We have the main ingredient. Remember I talked about this before. When you go to a restaurant, it says on the menu, we have tukpa. They're not lying. The tukpa is not prepared yet, right? So they're not lying. There's tukpa when in actuality there isn't any. What it means is we have all the ingredients to make that tukpa, to whip it up and serve it to you. So likewise, we say we have Buddha nature, which doesn't mean we're Buddhas now, but it means we have everything to be a Buddha. We have that mind. If you were to strip it now magically from what is in the way to becoming a Buddha, you'd be a Buddha. Right here and right now. Right? That pure mind. But the cognitive obscurations were caused by this root misconception. If you get rid of that, you get rid of everything else. But why do I need to understand that I can get rid of that? No, why do I need to? So first I need to understand that I can get rid of that to become a Buddha, right? But how can I come to understand that I can get rid of it? How does emptiness help me to understand? And now I've really given you the last hint. How understanding emptiness, how do you know? How do you know that if you realize emptiness, how do you know that this root misconception, you can get rid of it?
Well, because you got rid of it by that experience of emptiness.
No, if you realize emptiness, you still have that misconception. Yeah, I mean, you have to then realize it directly and everything, right? But what does it show you? What does it show you once you realize emptiness? What does it show you when it comes to that misconception holding on to inherent existence?
It's not a realistic mind.
It's a wrong consciousness. It's not in accordance with reality. And a mind that is not in accordance with reality can be removed. Right? The snake in the cupboard. The snake in the cupboard. There is no snake in the cupboard. How can I remove that wrong mind and the resulting fear and terror and what have you? I can look in the cupboard. There is no snake. So when I understand there is no snake, I understand that mind was a wrong consciousness. Right? I can come to understand that mind was a wrong consciousness. And I can remove that mind. And if I know this is the root cause of all my trouble, this is the root cause why I'm not enlightened yet, but that root cause can be removed because it's not in accordance with reality, I can understand that enlightenment is possible. Right? This is the main difficulty I find. Yeah, a lot of people struggle with that because if you have to be really familiar with logic, with the explanation, the presentation of the mind in Buddhism. One of the first things we learn is what is a wrong consciousness. Its object doesn't exist, right? A wrong consciousness is a mind whose object doesn't exist. So we learn, the first thing we learn is that a wrong consciousness is not in accordance with reality, and it can be removed, right? Any wrong consciousness can be removed by understanding the non-existence of its object. Do you agree or disagree? Do you disagree? Give me an example. Does that make sense?
It doesn't not make sense.
That was a good response. It doesn't not make sense. Right, but it's a little difficult, yeah. We don't think along these lines, like negating the main object. It's a little difficult. It takes some getting used to.
Well, it's right. His Holiness says, he doesn't say he's a Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
He says his religion is kindness.
How does that?
Because he's not a Buddhist. He says he's not a Buddhist, his religion is kindness. So he negates it.
His Holiness says he's not a Buddhist. His
He doesn't
religion
say,
is...
oh, I've said that wrong. He doesn't say his religion is Buddhism. He says his religion is kindness.
Religion is Buddhism. His Holiness says his religion is kindness. Okay, this is... I don't really see how that relates to what I said, but it's very important to what I said earlier.
Yes.
That in the end, Buddhism is just a label. But what is the essence of Buddhism is kindness, and that's important to recognize. Okay, but yes, I see that. But no, it's fine. No, don't worry about it. It's good. You did give it some thought, even though...
Something's stuck there.
I can tell from your face. Every time that comes up, you actually put your face down. I asked this question so many times. But you're not alone. It's very difficult. For some reason, it takes some time to get used to it. Never mind, that's why I say time and again. Anyway, understanding emptiness. Once you understand emptiness, you understand, oh my God, that mind that's controlling my life, it's not realistic. I can remove it. And that means I can remove the other afflictions. And saying removing the affliction is the same as saying I'm liberated, right? And then enlightenment, you just need to get rid of the imprints left by the afflictions. I'm saying just as if it was that easy. No, but if you understand the process, we go in the right direction. Right now it's very coarse. And we're going into all these difficult explanations on bodhisattvas. I mean, there's more to come. And this is not like, oh, this is a problem I'm having. We are dealing with bodhisattva problems that are not our problems. But it's so helpful because it shows us where we're going. It gives us a context to our own practice, right? So right now, okay, we don't have bodhicitta, we're not bodhisattvas, but we get a sense, that's why understanding emptiness is important, even if we can't do it. But it shows us the importance of emptiness. Right? Not to neglect it, not to just focus on, yeah, bodhicitta is wonderful and it makes us feel good, and great compassion does too. And we like to neglect emptiness a little bit because it gives us a headache. But to do both, right? And to use emptiness in the sense, okay, that actually establishes that liberation is possible, that Buddhahood is possible. Why? Because it shows us that root misconception is just a wrong mind. If you ask your parents, do I exist inherently or not? What are your parents going to say? Of course you are, right? If you ask anyone else, of course, I have to explain them what inherent existence means. But in the end, will you find the I? Of course, right? Our whole life, we believed on it. We believed in this innately, but also intellectually. It makes perfect sense to us, as reflected in many Buddhist schools who also believe in the inherent existence, right? And we were taught about these Buddhist schools because they prepare our mind to then eventually understand the higher school, the Prasangika, and not be terrified when that last bit, inherent existence, is taken away from us. All right. Anyway, it just takes time. It takes time. And confusion is good. Our entire study, honestly, our study was made in such a way. Confusion was seen as good. Really, we're not good with confusion in the West. We want to understand it right away. We are purposely confused in when we study it. When we study it, we have texts, and I said that on a few occasions, but we have debate manuals. If they want to teach you that A is D, so you can replace A and D with anything, the message of a particular passage is that A is D. But it doesn't say A is D. It says A is B. Whatever is B is necessarily E. And whatever is E must be Z. Z is K. And because K, and in the end it's like, what? And in the end, if you read it again and again, you go, oh, A is D. I know I get it. But it took a lot of concentration. It took a lot of focus. And it helps you to understand how A being D is connected to so many other aspects. Right? It's connected to so much else. It leads to confusion. And you know what's the best feeling after being totally confused? One of the best feeling after like an hour of confusion, when you're able to formulate or articulate the first question. Because initially it's like, I don't even know what question to ask. I don't know what they're saying. Right? If someone were to say, well, if you don't understand, ask me a question. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand anything. I don't even know what question to ask. I don't even know what I don't understand. I don't understand anything. But then, at some point you go, oh, whatever is K is necessarily P. That one. Can you explain that to me? And so you understand that bit, or you think about it yourself, right? And then you go to the next point, and you go to the next point, and then in the end, just formulating questions, it's kind of like you order your mind. You get some clarity in your mind. Okay, this is what I know. And it comes down to not understanding 5 things. You understand, if I understand these 5 things, then I understand what this is saying. And you have to be patient. You learn to be patient. You can't ask right away, okay, you have a cup of tea. It's okay. You have to wait. And there are some questions you sometimes don't want to ask. You want to figure it out yourself. Sometimes your teachers torture you. No, they don't torture you, but they say, figure it out yourself. Go to debate, right? Figure it out yourself. Yeah, that happens as well. And even if they were to give you an answer, you're not going to understand it fully. I answered that question about why you have to understand emptiness before, and it still doesn't really. So never mind. You'll come to it. One day it clicks and you understand it. Right? So this confusion is good. Yes, please.
So when we understand emptiness, we automatically understand that our self-grasping doesn't exist.
It does exist,
No,
but its object doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a wrong
Consciousness, exactly. Yes.
So why then do I still need to focus on bodhicitta? Because when my self is unimportant, it should arise automatically, no?
Right? Why do I still have to do all this work? If I look at in the cupboard, that's a valid question, very good question. So if I look in the cupboard, there's no snake. My mind holding on to the snake is gone. Right? If I open the cupboard, I look for the snake, there is no snake, I'll realize absence of snake in the cupboard, I will no longer have a mind holding on to the snake. But why doesn't that happen when it comes to understanding lack of inherent existence? Why is my self-grasping not all gone? Why am I not right away compassionate? Have bodhicitta? Why not?
Imprints.
Yeah, these bloody imprints. Because that wrong view of no snake in the cupboard, I've maybe had for a few days, but that wrong view when it comes to inherent existence, not only did I have it since I was born, since beginningless time. My mind is so accustomed to holding on to inherent existence. In fact, it appears in every moment, even though I realize emptiness. Bad news. I hate that. I would love it to be that way. Realize emptiness and be done. Yes.
Didn't you say the other week that realising impermanence
Yes.
would unravel it all?
Oh, no, no, no. I didn't say it unravels
No, you
at
didn't
all.
say that,
But it takes us a lot closer to at least intellectually or conceptually understanding emptiness.
what I've heard was that if you really focused on impermanence, you, I don't know, open mind.
It does open the mind, but not enough to now have bodhicitta and realizing emptiness. No, but it's a huge step, a step that we maybe underestimate. A step we underestimate the fact that once you understand, impermanence seems like big deal. You understand things change all the time, big deal. But actually, it takes us a lot closer to a sense that can't be a concrete, self-sufficient I that controls everything.
It's a great compassion, that was it.
Great compassion.
Meditating on
Okay, so meditating impermanence on sentient beings, it greatly enhances great compassion, but it means that you have already great compassion, and that is further enhanced by your understanding of impermanence, right? But it can also lead us to generating great compassion. But I make it sound so easy because I'm not talking about those years in between. We're not mentioning them. I never gave any kind of time frame. Right? I make it sound that easy, but of course it all takes time. And I think one thing that's difficult to change is your diet. Would you agree? Right? I mean, if you're raised on a diet like, I don't know, tukpa and momos, as many Tibetans were, and tsampa, it's definitely very difficult to have sushi and olives the next day, right? As you can imagine. So you're raised on a very vast variety of different food items, okay, but it's still hard to change our diet. What is so much more difficult is to change our mind. It's the only thing we can truly change, but I think it's the most difficult change. Don't underestimate it. It's the most rewarding, but most things that are rewarding are difficult. I mean, come on, right? Like, let's face it. Most things that are really rewarding are usually difficult. To change our mind is so difficult, but there's good news. In the beginning, it's more difficult than later. In the beginning, it's the hardest. What analogy did I give you? Geshe Pesant's analogy. Geshe Pesant, for those of you who don't know, he's an incredible practitioner, scholar practitioner, an amazing, humble monk and everything, who lives nearby actually. So when he gives teachings, you find his teachings online, Geshe Pesant. Amazing. Amazing teacher. So he gave this beautiful analogy. Maybe it's from somewhere else, but I've heard him use it for the first time. So what analogy does he give? What is Dharma practice in the beginning? Think jungle, bicycle. Jungle, bicycle. Yeah? Cycling in the jungle with lots of roots and potholes, right? Trying to practice the Dharma in the beginning is like someone gives you this street bike, not like a, mountain bike, not a mountain bike, no, like a street bike, right? Someone gives you that, and you're driving through the jungle with like roots and trees and plants and potholes everywhere. How smooth is your ride? It's a disaster. That's how Dharma practice. And you fall off your bike, and then you get on it again, and you fall off again, and you get on again. You know, it's like, yeah, you practice for one day, but the next day you're angry for 5 days. I mean, right? It feels like you take one step forward and then 3 backwards. That's our practice in the beginning. But if we keep getting onto the bike, as the homeless says, never give up. At some point, the road kind of smoothens out a little bit, and it gets easier. It gets easier and easier until you hit the highway. And now your street bike is perfect, right? It doesn't come with the same kind of effort. So let's just hang in there. Of course, we could also choose not to do it. Oh, it's so difficult. Dharma practice is so difficult. Let's stay in samsara. That is easier. Well, for the next, I don't know, countless eons, let's stay in samsara. What is more difficult? What is more difficult? To be thrown around by our karma and our afflictions. This life would be maybe doing okay, but who knows what lies ahead, right? I don't know, would I be reborn as a cow? And cow in the West or cow in India, I don't want to be a cow. Right? It doesn't matter where. So the point is, it's so much easier to actually, I mean, it's great hardship, but I think it's easier to go through that than to stay in samsara. I think. But it's of course up to everyone else what they choose to do. So yeah, this change is really, really slow. Very slow. I guess I cannot add enough berries. Very, very, extremely slow. But okay, never mind. The thing is, like, and I've said that also on a few occasions, we are living at a time when fast food and fast internet are part of our reality, and the problem is the only thing we cannot fasten is this process. Okay, never mind. Okay, but having said, was there a question? Oh yes, please go ahead.
For me, Tibetan Buddhism is new. Yeah?
Okay, yes.
And what to say? I always made a difference between the conditioned mind and the unconditioned mind.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I learned in my practice. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And my practice was starting just with meditation sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? And in the sessions, this is from Zen,
Mm-hmm.
I made a different experience of life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Things, it was much different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But after session, I say now from my speech, the conditioned mind was coming back,
Mm-hmm.
and we had take overhand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And so my work is more in meditation, yeah, and there I start to feel free,
Mm-hmm.
but then I come back to the normal life, with the conditioned life. And long time I had a conflict between these two minds, yeah. I always thought the goal is the unconditioned mind, but then I was thinking, well, I need this conditioned mind for to survive in this world, yeah. Without this conditioned mind, I would not to be able to discriminate between a good and a bad mango.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is how these two minds work together for me. Yeah?
Okay, yes. Okay, you're making an important point. I mean, you're talking about the Zen practice. You're more familiar with the Zen practice. Tibetan Buddhism is new. And the difficulty that you encounter was like when you meditate, it seems your unconditioned mind, the more like the natural mind, comes to the surface. Whereas if you stop meditating stop doing the Zen meditations or the kind of meditations you've learned in the Zen tradition, then the conditioned mind comes back.
Yes.
And there's this gap.
Yes.
But on the other hand, to just have the unconditioned mind all the time, you can't function in the world. Because the conditioned mind helps you to distinguish between a Buddha, an enlightened person, and an unenlightened person. I need to repeat this for the recording, yeah. So how to go about this? Well, yeah, first of all, in this tradition, the conditioned, the unconditioned mind, you don't use the same kind of terminology, but there is definitely this common kind of idea. First of all, we have the mind that is influenced by conventions, the ordinary mind. There is the coarse kind of mind that is active right now. And then there's the subtler kind of mind. When we meditate, for instance, I'm not talking about the subtlest kind of mind, but what you call unconditioned mind is the mind that is not affected by everyday, not necessarily affected by our afflictions. It's this calmer kind of mind. So maybe a subtler kind of version of that, even not the subtlest that we usually discuss. So how to bring the two together? Well, in this tradition, it is explained that analytical meditation can be very helpful in that way. And I'm glad you're bringing it up, because this is also something I want to remind you of again. That we learn certain things here, and now we use our ability to analyze. This is the conditioned mind. We analyze. We use the analytical mind, but we analyze things to such a degree that hopefully it leads to some kind of conviction, and then it leads to an emotional response. An emotional response. And that is so hard to put into words. Like, how do you explain emotions? What kind of emotions are there? It could be, for instance, just that deep conviction that, I don't know, getting angry, it really harms me. It really, like this, from deep within, I have a sense, what am I doing? It doesn't do anything to the situation, like just as an example. Or the conviction that compassion makes sense. Great compassion makes sense. So it moves you deep from within in such a way that you're now ready to change. That is, your mind is ready to change. I usually give the example, well, maybe leave the anger. I could give the example of the anger. Anger, when we get angry, we say I got angry without a reason. We never get angry without a reason. We never do. So let's take the situation of anger. Our mind works in a similar way. So excuse me for those who've heard me say that many times. But the thing is, someone says something and you start analyzing what they've done. You start reflecting on what they've done, right? With anger. You analyze, and you become convinced you've been wronged, that person is a jerk. And here it's not logical kind of analysis, it's a wrong type of analysis, but analysis nevertheless. And you become convinced this is wrong, this is terrible. And the emotional response is deep anger, resentment. And then out of that resentment we act, right? Now this is on a negative scale. And it's never as powerful as a meditation on reality. Because it's not based on reality. When we get angry, we exaggerate the negative aspects of that person. Our mind projects. Remember the cognitive scientist Aaron Beck, who said 90% when we get angry or when we perceive, even with just resentment, 90% of what we perceive is a projection. Where does that projection come from? From our own mind. Now let's change it around. We take an object that is realistic, impermanence or whatever else. What is really difficult in the beginning, analytical meditation, what's the main problem is lack of concentration. We're too distracted. We never come to that point of like, wow. So in the beginning, we start with analytical meditation and we be distracted. We bring the mind back. We're distracted. We bring the mind back. With anger, it's so interesting. We're so focused, right? We're so enraged that someone said that to us. So concentration is right there. Concentration doesn't arise when it comes to these meditations, but it can be trained. It can be trained. So to such a degree that if you do it every day, 5 minutes first, then 10 minutes, you slowly increase it. Don't stop for too long. You increase it. And then you meditate, let's say, on compassion. That realize, or that insight that you gain from your compassion deeply moves you to now be compassionate. You want to be compassionate, and you uncondition your mind. The conditioned mind that usually, I don't know this person, why do I care about their happiness? They harm me. I don't want them to be happy. It gets unconditioned by that. You recondition your mind, but this time, when we say reconditioned, you're getting in touch with the unconditioned mind, the nature of our mind, which is actually compassionate. The nature of our mind is compassionate. And in response to her question early on, well, when we realize emptiness, why doesn't that come through? Because that realization of emptiness is not strong enough yet to remove all these imprints, all these residues left in our mind because of being not compassionate. But I think what we do with these practices, we get more in touch with the unconditioned mind. We move closer to the actual nature of our mind. And first it's fake. We don't have the compassion. We don't yet have the compassion of a bodhisattva, for instance. But we're moving in these directions. So I remember Geshe Dorje Damdo once said something. He didn't say it. I wasn't there when he said it, but my friend Gila told me. She said, Geshe Dorje Damdo said, in the beginning, when we practice these things like compassion, we are like an astronaut wearing the outfit, trying to dance a ballet. I mean, how graceful does it look if you wear the astronaut outfit, you know, like these bulky kind of things, you know, around your arms and your legs. How graceful can you be trying to do ballet? It looks very awkward. And that's what our compassion will be in the beginning. But we're moving more towards our unconditioned mind until the two basically connect. I mean, this becomes more obvious when you practice Tantra, for instance, where you first meditate on utilizing the coarse mind, but meditating as if your subtle mind were active. And then you do certain practices where you connect more and more with the subtle mind until it can actually manifest, and you can do the same meditation with your subtle mind, right? This is really where the most advanced practices, where you actually bring the coarse conditioned mind together with the unconditioned. And unconditioned doesn't mean permanent. It means a mind that is not affected by samsara, but a mind whose continuum we had since beginning this time, and it's never changed in terms of its quality. So that was a bit of an extensive answer. It's an extremely long process, but we're moving in the right direction in that way. Okay, but to finish that last debate, I still haven't moved on. I was thinking like I could finish faster, but never mind. This is all maybe interesting. So the compassionate mind, a non-dual cognition, as well as the awakening mind, these are all causes of a bodhisattva. Now see the sequence: compassion, realizing emptiness, and then the awakening mind. We had a little bit of that discussion before. But then you have the precious garland by Nagarjuna, who also mentions these three in that same section of the text. So if you go back now, if one aspires for oneself and for the world to attain the unexcelled enlightenment, the roots of this are an awakening mind. As firm as mirror, king of mountains, compassion extending in all directions, agnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, gnosis, wisdom, not rooted in duality. Here the order is different. First the awakening mind, and again it's the contrived awakening mind, great compassion, and realizing emptiness. Very different sequence, but okay, just to note. And then you have Shantarakshita's ornament of the middle way. What does he say? First searching for perfect understanding and ascertaining thoroughly the ultimate truth, understanding of emptiness. They then generate great compassion for the world, enveloped in destructive views, the world that is enveloped in its destructive views, and become heroic in working for others. Great compassion. Three different sequences. So when you debate on the debate ground, you're saying, which one is it? Right? You ask, regarding the subject, those three minds that are a cause of bodhicitta. In entering the middle way, the sequence is great compassion, realization of emptiness, contrived bodhicitta. In the precious garland by Nagarjuna, the sequence is contrived awakening mind, great compassion, realization of emptiness. In Shantarakshita's ornament for the Mahayana, the ornament of the middle way, it is realization of emptiness, the great compassion, great compassion, and then bodhicitta. I said it the other way around. So then they generate great compassion for the world and become heroic in working for others. Bodhicitta. So you have realization of emptiness first, secondly, great compassion, and then contrite bodhicitta. Which one is it? Which of these three is it? What do you think? Definitely not the third. Definitely not the second. Contrived awakening mind, bodhicitta, gnosis. So here the sequence, not that the sequence is wrong, it's just not the sequence, or no, the sequence, it's not given in the sequence of practice. So it is mentioned just in a different kind of order. But what about the order of these three? Is it the first one? First great compassion, then the mind realizing emptiness, and then bodhicitta? Or is it first realizing emptiness, then great compassion, and then bodhicitta, contrite bodhicitta? Which one is it? So in other words, does the realization of emptiness come before great compassion or after?
Depends on the people, depends on the person. Some are more...
Okay, for those of sharp mental faculty, okay, great, that's a good response. It depends on the person. But let's say for those of mental faculty, like they're not going to aim for the removal of suffering of sentient beings before they know it's possible, right? You wish for this, wish for all sentient beings to be free from samsaric suffering. You wish to even contribute to that. Well, before you get there, you're like, is it possible or not? I'm not going to make an effort. I'm not going to meditate for years or however long to get there. I first want to know whether it's possible, right? That's for those of great spiritual capacity. And we've heard that Chandrakirti addresses those first, directly. Okay. So actually that would be the right sequence. According to Chantarakshita, what is great compassion? It's a wish for all sentient beings to be free from samsaric suffering. And contributing to that, is samsaric suffering, is it possible to remove it? Yes, because the root cause is a wrong consciousness. And understanding emptiness means I can understand that the root cause is not in accordance with reality. It can therefore be removed, and therefore it is possible to contribute to the removal of suffering. Now, there's still one debate left. Why does Chandrakirti tell us of a different order? What could be the reason for that? He mentions great compassion first, and then the realization of emptiness. Why that different order? And then contrite bodhicitta. So why does he do that? Yes?
Maybe we don't have a motivation to even look if liberation is possible. If we don't have a goal, like we want to help the people around us, we have this compassion because my suffering, due to interconnectedness, depends on the suffering of other people. So if these people suffer, that will make me suffer on some level. Like I cannot be completely free if everyone else is suffering.
You cannot be free from everyone else's suffering.
We are so interconnected. Everything we do in everyday life is dependent on other people. So we kind of need them to go with us for enlightenment.
But how is that connected? I don't see the relationship between, in one case, saying that the mind realizing emptiness comes after great compassion, and in the other case it comes before. So I agree with you, we're all interconnected, of course. Sorry, I forgot to repeat the question. So I'll repeat the question fast and make sure I understand it correctly. So you're saying that in general, for some people, there's great compassion. So unless we understand we're all suffering and we're interconnected, we cannot generate great compassion. Oh no, I didn't get it right.
Why would I even look for emptiness?
Why would I even
if
bother
I don't have a proper goal to look for it?
Oh, so why would, so now I get it. So why would I be concerned with emptiness? Why would I, check out emptiness, analyze emptiness, if I have no goal? But the goal is expressed by great compassion, right? Great compassion is the goal to contribute, to help sentient beings to overcome suffering. So you already have a goal. You're right, if it wasn't the goal, why would I, what do I care about emptiness if emptiness has got nothing to do, if I don't have a particular goal? But one of your goals is the benefit of sentient beings. That's expressed by great compassion.
Yeah, but that's why it has to come before emptiness, no?
Well, actually, the thing is, for a person of greater mental capacity, they would check, is that goal possible? Is it a realistic goal? Why do I aspire towards that goal if it's unrealistic? Maybe there's no possibility for all sentient beings to remove suffering. Maybe I cannot contribute because I cannot remove not even my own suffering. So first I have to know, is liberation possible? And for that I have to know emptiness. That's actually the sequence. But Chandrakirti says the other way around. The order is the other way around. So why is that? Yes, please.
Maybe because Chandrakirti composed the text about emptiness,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to start by emphasizing great and compassion as important.
Mm-hmm.
So he focuses it, and that's why he starts with talking about great compassion is most important at first, and middle and end. So maybe it's because it's first in the sequence because.
All right, so what he just said, and I've repeated it again, make sure, and please correct me if I misunderstand. All right, so Chandrakirti here, what he wants to do is emphasize that great compassion is the root of everything. That great compassion, from there, then everything else follows. So to put more of the emphasis on that. Is that what you're saying?
And particularly because he's composing the text about emptiness.
In particular because he composes the text on emptiness, with the 6th chapter being the most extensive one, so not to lose sight of why we're doing this. That's actually a really nice point. Not to lose sight of that. Yeah, that's actually, I didn't think about that. I think it's a good idea to put it, it's like, because the whole thing is about wisdom here and wisdom there. So it seems at some point we lose a little sight of the method aspect because we're just going into, so to redirect or to say, well, I started with that. That is the root of everything, so don't forget. That's what we're doing it. Yes. Well, the answer, that's definitely, I think, a good way of looking at it. I remember some of my teachers, they gave a different kind of response. At least one teacher, I remember it because I put it down in my notes. One of my teachers said that here it's true that actually the realization of emptiness for a person who's got that kind of mind, who would always check the reality of a particular aspiration, well, for that kind of mind, yes, for that person it is true. First you have realization of emptiness, then great compassion. But you want great compassion to be, you want your realization of emptiness to be conjoined with great compassion. Remember conjoined? So directly and indirectly conjoined. Once you have great compassion, then if you realize emptiness, then your realization of emptiness is now conjoined. It's now enhanced by great compassion. Your realization of emptiness. So this idea of being conjoined, we haven't talked about this enough yet. I did mention it a few times, but the thing is, every mind you develop is very helpful for the mind that is to follow. For instance, you realize emptiness first, but you don't have great compassion yet. Then, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, but your understanding of emptiness is not as powerful versus the mind that arises after your first time of realization of emptiness. Then you generate great compassion. And then, because now it's conjoined with your great compassion, next time it arises, it's enhanced. It has been enhanced by great compassion. So, and then basically the idea, of course, well, great compassion makes that mind so special. It's different from this mind is different now. The mind realizing emptiness conjoined with great compassion is not like the mind of a hero, a solitary realizer, because they don't have that type of compassion. They have great compassion. No, not great compassion. They have the mind realizing emptiness, but it's conjoined with renunciation. Right? It's conjoined with the wish to liberate themselves from cyclic existence. Amazing. But their mind realizing emptiness is not as powerful. And later on, as we progress, of course, bodhicitta, the mind realizing emptiness conjoined with bodhicitta, even more powerful. Yeah, so it's not just the mind itself, it's also what it is conjoined with that determines its strength, its power. And so that was one response at least that I got, and I'm sure there are others, and I also like what you said, but the point is, I'm just repeating what one of my teachers said. So he said, here we're talking about a kind of realization of emptiness that is different from the one before great compassion. It is enhanced now by great compassion. Does that make sense? And this is just, I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong or whatever. I'm just sharing with you what I've learned from one of my teachers. Great. And still I didn't get to do the last 4. Yeah, but as I said, it's not about finishing the text. It's about covering a lot of the subjects that when we studied this text, we covered years beforehand. We covered all these ideas. So, yes. Yeah, many of these discussions we had before we studied. When did we study Uma? 7 years before, 7 years after we started our study. So 7 years. And the one thing I think is important, and that was also stressed, we had classes where everything was put into perspective. Those were not the official philosophy classes, but we had classes when it was just about the Lamrim or letter to a friend, where the practical aspects, like your questions, like, okay, we learn about impermanence and so forth. How is this practical? How is it on a daily basis? So we had Wednesday's classes. On Wednesday we had classes. So our teachers taught subjects that were easier, but they always brought them back kind of like, okay, this is what it says in this text. This is how it's practical for you. This is how you can apply it now. So it wasn't just some dry theoretical stuff, but we found ways to bring it into our lives, to make it relevant. It took time, but yeah, so I'm trying to do all this together at the same time and bring a little bit of logic. We also spend some month every year to study the Pramanavartika, the text on logic. So today I gave you at least one quote. Wasn't that much, but you got one quote. Anyway, I'll do it next time. I promise we'll continue. I need to speed it up a little bit. But as I told you, the beginning is so important. Also, in terms of like great compassion being so important, to have that as the basis for everything. Because emptiness is going to be a lot of abstract ideas. But hopefully you have a strong basis in that now. I can always refer back to it to not lose sight of why we're doing this. All right. Anyway, yeah. So we'll continue next time. That's now. Pardon? Oh, there's. I totally ignore them. I'm so sorry. So if you need to leave, I'll answer this. I'll try and address this question. I was so good in the beginning. I was so good in the beginning of looking at this phone, but I neglected it. My apologies. All right. So what's the question? If it is impermanent, it follows it is in the nature of suffering. No, there's no pervasion. For example, the omniscient mind in the second seal specifically says it's the contaminated phenomena of the nature of suffering. If the challenger's position holds, are we saying if it is impermanent, it is necessarily contaminated? There's someone who studied debate, B. So she's saying, I had this quote from the Pramanavartika, remember? The insight into impermanence leads to the insight into suffering. So she's saying, does that mean whatever is impermanent is necessarily in the nature of suffering? No, that's not what we're saying. Whatever is impermanent is not necessarily in the nature of suffering. We're not saying, for instance, the mind of a Buddha is impermanent or the Buddha's body is impermanent, doesn't mean it's in the nature of suffering. But here it's specifically saying our body, our 5 aggregates basically, them being in the nature, being impermanent, our mind being impermanent, our experiences. We can't separate our experiences from our mind. There is no objective reality, right? There's only a subjective reality, which is a reflection of our own mind. You want to know what we did in the past? Look at your mind right now. You want to know what your mind is going to be in the future? No. You want to know what you did in the past? Look at your experiences right now. You want to know what your experiences will be in the future? Look at your mind right now. right? That really famous saying. It's exactly that. So therefore, our mind and body right now, our experiences are a reflection of our own past mind. And changing all the time, it's in the nature of suffering, so it's under the control of karma and affliction, it is constantly changing. So the fact that nothing we enjoy right now, we can enjoy forever. Whatever we do, it's eventually going to change into a type of suffering. If I ask you a favorite activity, being with my friends. Well, I'll lock you into a room with your friends for the next 48 days. Let's see how you feel afterwards. Because eventually it will turn into suffering. Whatever, I love eating peanut butter or whatever. I used to teach, never mind, those who ate a lot of peanut butter. But the point is, I love eating peanut butter. That first spoon of peanut butter, we love it. But then eventually it turns into suffering if you keep eating the same food. So the point is, whatever we do, our mind is in the nature of suffering, because all our happiness, if we don't change the object, it will inevitably change into suffering. Yeah. So we're saying here, our mind and body, understanding that impermanent, we understand that's in. All right. Very much, and sorry for going on forever. All left is to dedicate all the positive potential we accumulated today. Let's of course dedicate it towards our own enlightenment by thinking, well, however long it may take, but may it still become a cause for us to attain the full enlightened state of a Buddha for the benefit of each and every sentient being. But in the meantime, may our positive potential become a cause for our great masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other great masters who are an embodiment of the Dharma, to have a long and healthy life so they can continue to guide and inspire us through their actions and their teachings. And may whatever positive potential we accumulated have also a positive benefit on the people around us, however subtle they may be. In particular, may it affect those in power who may cause a lot of suffering, intentionally or unintentionally, to other sentient beings, to bring more wisdom and compassion into their hearts. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayers. In the snow and cycle land, you're the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara, Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. The brave Manjushri and also Samantabhadra realize things as they are. Hence, in order to be able to follow their example, I dedicate these merits in the best way. With the dedication praised to Supreme by the victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate all these roots of virtue so that I might engage in the noble bodhisattva deeds. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.